Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Bloc, and today we're going to take a good long look at everything coming with Victoria 3 Sphere of Influence expansion with relation to power blocks. Power blocks, if you were not aware, are meant to become this big empire building project that you can pursue over every playthrough of yours. Today we're going to take a look at all the basics, and then the developer is essentially going to walk us through creating a power block, maintaining it, and ultimately I believe actually losing it as Italy. So for starters, let's just jump right in because, well, again, there is a lot coming here. Power blocks are multinational associations that are led by a great power or a major power. You can see right here, this is Great Britain's power block, and well, there are some weird guests going on right there that the player must have added to the power block as they played. These are essentially just a depiction of the strongest nations in a power block, with the leader being up front, of course, being Britain. Then we have the British Raj, we have, of course, the Shogunate, we have Mexico, and we have one of the Indian miners. This is quite interesting, although it feels very odd, because this is most certainly a very odd collection of leading powers. To go a bit deeper into how power blocks work, let's take a look at what the developers write right here. With power blocks, they are providing a new and different opportunity for you to take control of one of these powerful empires, to assemble and customize your own block, shape its effects on members to your liking, and guide its expansion and struggle with other power blocks for domination over the region. A country can only be part of one power block at the same time. That does not mean that a country is locked into a power block forever though. There are ways for them to leave and join another block, if the conditions align, or even for a power block to be completely dismantled. Great powers will generally have an easier time leading a power block than major powers, due to their higher budget of influence, which is a part of the upkeep cost for power blocks. Additionally, there is a cohesion penalty being applied to major powers leading a power block, to reflect that they don't quite have the authority or respect of others. This fact and some other things that we will get into later should make the fight for the top of the prestige leaderboards more rewarding and fun. You can see right here already that this was the major, I think, drive that the developers had when designing this. They really wanted empire building and the fight for the leaderboard to matter much more. And well, honestly, I'm quite happy with this basic implementation as it is depicted here for starters. I like the idea that I can be a major power having a power block, but, well, will people really take me seriously? That's a different topic. Making prestige more interesting, I think, is definitely a positive right here. There will be some power blocks established at game start already, for example the Zollverein and the British Empire. You can start playing as Great Britain and you will already have a power block ready to go if you desire to do so. However, also playing as a regular member of any power block will feel different than being outside of them. While there are good reasons why you may not want to join any power block, there is also potential for powerful effects and cooperation with other members of the same block. If we take a look at this right here, we can see some of the existing power blocks at game start. I think who might be missing here is probably only the United States of America, maybe Spain, not entirely sure there. We can see the Zollverein, the Congress system, so this is Prussia and Austria. We can see the Russian Empire, and we can see the Turkish bloc, which is the Devlet İaliye. If I'm not mistaken here, that means the High Port, right? So basically everything under the Sultan himself. And then we can also see, actually on the left side here, some possessions of the French and of the British. Basically Hanover and indeed, what is that? I think Lucca. I think that is the city that they have under their control right there. We're basically seeing these different power blocks, and we can also see that Kurland is now indeed independent. Well, I mean, independent is a strong word. They were just turned into an autonomous region. That is primarily, I would guess, because Kurland was in a very special position within the Russian Empire when it comes to its own integration. These power blocks exist, and I really think that they will, with their visuals alone, add quite a bit to gameplay. But, of course, there is also a heavy mechanical implementation. Let's take a look at this by starting to create a power block. The developers do this here with the example of a formed Italy having just recently gained independence and unification, and then starting their own block and customizing it. Let's jump right into that. When you form your power block, you can customize a few aesthetic things to make it look as pretty or crazy or as historic as possible, whatever floats your boat. It starts with the name, of course. I see you called it the Venetian League. Excellent choice. It continues with the emblem. We have added a number of options for you to choose from to decorate your crest. For the color selection, we have added support for a traditional color picker, so that you have the full freedom to express yourself, be it pink, green, or Prussian yellow blue. You can also see that there is a selection for a map pattern. This pattern will be displayed in the map modes that deal with power blocks, and its color will be the same as your chosen primary color, as you may have seen from the historic power block screenshot. This right here is just a mock-up, but it is a menu that honestly looks good to me. You can customize your power block right here. There will be, of course, the color picker as mentioned. You can choose the map pattern and so on. In general, I'm a big fan of this. I think this should make it so that you can make something quite nice and hopefully nicer than whatever these really ugly pattern on the historical map are. I mean, come on, what is this purple stuff? This developer art needs to go. Jokes aside, this looks decent. I am not at all against this. Now next up, something that I am kind of against. This right here. In the next tab, you can find the statue customization window. Here you can shape the looks of the fantastic monuments which countries of your power block can build. Keep this in mind. There's a variety of pedestals, statues and accessories to choose from to demonstrate your power block's might to the world. Countries in a power block will be able to build them and profit from their effects, which can be something like influence, authority or similar effects based on how you want to shape your power block. Of course, the game rule for monument effects will be expanded to include statues, if you desire to disable their effects and build them just for their looks. Similar to the emblem and the colors of your block, you also can customize your statue right here. You can see that you have a couple of different options, several supporting options, and indeed then the hero and pedestal can also be customized. You can then also see one of these statues right here on the map. And look, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't really love this. I can't think of a single historical case where we had a, basically uniform statue that was just built all over the capital cities of an empire. And quite frankly, it just feels arcadey, it feels gamey. But I will say that in general, I would have liked it if this 3D art budget would have gone into, for example, some more unique buildings that come from power blocks. So buildings that will pop up in your cities, even if it is just visual, if you join a power block. Let's assume I am Britain and I take Japan into my block. Maybe after 10, 20 years, there will be some European, some British buildings in Tokyo itself. I think that would be much more interesting than these monuments. Personally, yeah, I'm just not that big a fan of this, but make sure to let me know in the comments what you think of it. Now luckily, these are not the only things that are coming on the 3D side of things when it comes to power blocks. Another addition that will bring power blocks more to the 3D world is a set of new vehicles, depending on the style of your block. You will also find that parts of the clothing of country leaders in the power block will change. So for example, you may see sabers, medals or sashes being worn by them. Which accessories are going to be worn and which vehicle will drive on your roads are based on what central identity pillar you pick of your power block. So basically, the central identity pillar that we will talk about just after this topic here will determine what will go on for your visuals. And see, these 3D things I'm honestly a fan of. Look at this. This is a glorious mantle. And I'm excited to see what, for example, communist power blocks will wear, or fascist power blocks, or religious power blocks. All that stuff seems really intriguing to me. And then, of course, the car right here. Honestly, I'm a big fan. The more stuff is going on the map that really reminds me of the civilization of the power block that I am building, the more will I be happy. This, most certainly, much more interesting to me than the monument. But alright, visuals aside, let's move on and move into the actual mechanical implementation. Because of course, how these spheres work, how power blocks in general work, what the implications are here is incredibly important. Because first and foremost, I think this is an implementation that is mechanical in nature. Now, I do want to point out that there is also a free component to these power blocks, so there will be free power blocks, although very limited. I just want to say this right here before we go into the deep end of what will be in the DLC itself. Let's take a look at the central identity pillar. Power blocks revolve around a central set of values. These can range from bringing as many subjects as possible into their glorious empire, looking at you, Great Britain and Russia, to a power block whose leader is interested in spreading their own religion throughout the world. Identity pillars change a few aspects of your power block. They provide a special ability to power block leaders. For example, the Trade League identity, making everybody part of a customs union under the leader, or the Sovereign Empire letting the leader turn a member into a subject of theirs under certain conditions. That certainly sounds incredibly powerful. They can also unlock certain groups of principles, and they define the rate at which you get principal mandates, which allows you to enact these principles. Right here we can see a work-in-progress selection of identities. We have a sovereign empire, so basically you just empire building and vassalizing and annexing everybody around you. Then political union. I wonder whether this includes both the religious, the ideological union, and so on and so forth. Then we have cooperative military organization. I'm not too sure what that is. I think this might be what the Austrians have at game start. In general, I am curious because they did tease that you could basically build the late game blocks, the Entente and so on, with power blocks. I wonder whether cooperative military organization is exactly this, multilateral military treaties. Although then again the question comes up, why would I do this if I could instead just say, hey, we are all in our sovereign empire power blocks, get massive benefits from this, and just go to war together. Not sure, because they don't explain it in this dev diary either. And then last but not least, I would argue the most basic one, because this one will also be in the free version of this patch, the Trade League. This also most certainly seems very moddable to me. I think you can add a variety of different options, and then from that, of course, a variety of new different principles as well. Speaking of principles, we now have the central identity. Let's talk about the principles surrounding it. While identities provide a central idea and a sort of rule set for your power block, principles can provide more practical expressions of that. Principles come in groups of 3 levels, generally providing different effects per level to all members of your block. Some are beneficial for everybody, while others are particularly favoring you, their great leader. The effects from principles of higher tiers are always added to the lower ones. So if you have the tier 3 principle of defensive cooperation unlocked, you also get the effects of tier 1 and 2. Right here we have a work in progress selection screen. You can see we got construction, market unification, advanced research, defensive cooperation, and trade. What exactly these entail isn't entirely certain, except for defensive cooperation. We have the 3 levels detailed underneath. I wonder what other options there are, because obviously these are just 5, and maybe this isn't even an in-game screenshot, but rather just a mock-up, like the mock-ups for the customization of your empire. Let's talk about some specifics. Defensive Cooperation 1, so the most basic levels, makes it so that you cannot start or join wars amongst power block members. This already is doubtlessly pretty restrictive. Defensive Cooperation 2 makes it so that within your power block it is minus 25% sway maneuver cost for the diplomatic play target, meaning it is much easier to call other people in if you're the target of a play, so if you're being attacked, which, yeah, makes sense, it's a defensive cooperation. Then Defensive Cooperation 3, all block members are obliged to join plays on power block members' side, so all of a sudden, automatically everybody has to jump in. This is pretty goddamn hefty, because normally this is only the case if somebody is a dominion or a puppet, or well, has a defensive pact with you. In this case, defensive pacts are basically useless because you already have this massive block behind you. I am super curious about this. Maybe it means that defensive pacts will be rarer because, well, all of a sudden you can just do this via your power block either way. And defensive pacts might just be something you primarily do with nations that, you know, are neither in a power block and neither are you. Now, the identities that we talked about at the very start have one or more primary principal groups, which indicate a deeper connection to the identity than most of the other principal groups. You will be required to choose one of the primary ones to form the Venetian League. Every additional principle you pick at a later stage will grant a bonus to your power block's cohesion. This can be impactful. You can exchange it later on if you'd like, but you may have a very hard time doing so. By having countries remain in your block, you will unlock the potential to upgrade existing principles or pick new ones with entirely different effects. Each member of your power block contributes a number of points towards a principal mandate. The higher their rank, the higher their contribution. So in short, you found your power block, you select your identity, you add your core pillar, and then the longer you exist, the longer people are inside of your power block, the more mandates do you generate, and then you can indeed expand on your existing principles or push it further by, you know, for example, selecting new ones. If we take a look at this right here, we can see the principles with market unification level 1, and we have advanced research level 3, so the maximum right there. We could add a new principle with the available mandates, and I think the 5 weeks in the center there means that within 5 weeks we're going to unlock an additional mandate. Alright, so that is how you lead your block. So far, I don't have much when it comes to criticism. Okay, you build your empire, if you join you can get negative or positive modifiers depending on whether the leader wants to destroy you and integrate you, or whether the leader says we all want to prosper. But how does it actually work? How do you get people to join and so on? This works via leverage. If you want to move a neutral country into your power block, or if you want to remove a country from a different power block and add it to yours, you have to raise your leverage. There are a couple of factors that contribute to power blocks building up leverage on a country. For example, at least one of the power block's members have an active interest in the country. This is a hard requirement, makes a lot of sense. You can also increase it by siding with a target in diplomatic place, by having lobbies for or against a country, and by developing economic dependence, which will be covered in more detail in a future dev diary, so let's just ignore that for the time being. By default, leverage will trend towards 0. So that means if you want to keep the leverage you have on a country, say Switzerland, active or even increase it, you will need to engage with them in some form or another. Something to keep in mind, and I find this quite interesting, is that if you are a member of a power bloc, you will have a harder time conducting diplomacy, because countries in other power blocs will feel intimidated and are less likely to agree to your proposals. This appears to be one of the reasons to stay neutral if you really want to. Now, to complete the discussion of leverage here, there are actually two values. One that continuously builds up over time if you meet the requirement, and another one, which is called active leverage, that is the result of your own leverage minus the next highest bloc's leverage. So, for example, if you have built up 100 leverage in Switzerland and the pesky Austrian bloc has 80 leverage on them, your active leverage is only 20. We also have a leverage map mode right here. I honestly really like this. I think this looks awesome. Oddly enough, the Ottomans and Austria here do not actually have a power bloc, but okay, let's ignore that for just 1 second. I like the way it pulsates. I really enjoy the way it goes through all of the other countries and shows the power of St. Petersburg. I also like that we can now see the Baltic Governorate directly in front of us very, very clearly. So that is basically the tag that exists in Courland. Alright, now if you manage to get enough active leverage, you can then invite Switzerland to your bloc. The active leverage your bloc has on them determines their likelihood of joining your bloc if you ask them nicely. I do wonder whether this means that we should ask them just whenever we feel like it to join our bloc, or whether there is a cost to such a request. For example, maybe we waste leverage if they indeed say no. Now, what is interesting to note is, of course, that you can't just ask them nicely. You can always apply a slightly firmer grip as well, if they need it, and threaten war with them to force them into your bloc. So essentially making a diplomatic demand that, if refused, goes into a diplomatic play. Of course, as with all diplomatic plays, this will also give you infamy and potentially lead others to join against you. Even after integrating Switzerland into your bloc, leverage needs to be kept up. Otherwise, it opens the door to another power bloc doing the same as you have done and convincing them to leave your bloc and join theirs instead. And with this knowledge, you will then be in control of creating your power bloc and indeed letting it prosper. I will say, and I just today earlier actually played some Victoria 2 because Tawani gave me access to this beautiful, beautiful mod where Bavaria is the leader of the Holy Roman Empire. This seems like a much less annoying sphering minigame as it was in Victoria 2. It really wasn't exciting at all. I do have some open questions, of course. Does it cost us leverage much like, it would cost us influence in Victoria 2 to, for example, ban an embassy and so on? Are there hostile actions that I can take to decrease the amount of leverage another nation has in a separate nation? What exactly is going on there? How exactly does that work? I don't feel like we got a good overview for that, because this is something rather important in my eyes at the very least, because it will determine just how annoying this minigame gets. In general though, it should be easy to read, of course, how well established I am in a country, how well established somebody else is in a country, and whether they are interested in that country in the first place. Now, what I am kind of missing here is basically an intent declaration. Say what you will, but in Victoria 2's sphering minigame, it was very easy to read, hey, will somebody try to remove this country from my sphere? And if I started, building up influence in a country in a sphere of somebody else, that other person would also notice. Here, I'm not entirely sure, since leverage seems to be something that just exists as long as you have diplomatic relationships and, of course, are in a power bloc. We're gonna see exactly how annoying and how not annoying this is. Right now, I have to sadly withhold judgment because there's a lot of information there in how this actually plays that we do not have access to. Alright, but let's assume that you have built your power blocks. You have added a couple of members, and now you're taking a look at how your power bloc is doing. This is where cohesion comes in. Cohesion is the measurement of how well the countries in your power bloc fit together. More than anything else, it looks at the identity to determine the target value, which it will then trend towards. So they are working with equilibriums right here. There are some other things in the game that can generate or drain cohesion though. For example, principles providing a benefit or reducing it, actions that leaders or members can take, events, etc. Similarly to legitimacy, the cohesion value will be in one of 5 brackets, each having different effects on your power bloc. They are mostly around the gain of leverage on members of your bloc, but can even halt the progress of principal mandate generation. Very, very interesting. So cohesion has a big impact there. You can see the cohesion bar right here as well. This entire mechanic, especially with the way it trends, very much reminds me of Stellaris. In Stellaris, however, I think it is fair to say that cohesion, I think they even use the term cohesion, right? Cohesion is something that is utilized and based on primarily your ideological values. Here in this case, I think it can be fine to be different ideologically speaking, although it probably gives you an incentive if you are an ideological bloc. But if you're just empire building, all that matters is, are you squeezing your subjects too hard or not? In general, I am actually a big fan of federations in Stellaris, so seeing Cohesion and all that stuff making maybe not a comeback but an evolution here is definitely not a negative from my point of view. Now the next point here is really interesting to me. The main problem that you are facing is that leverage gain on members in your own bloc is affected by Cohesion, which makes it harder to keep them around. Most countries that you add to your bloc will also reduce your cohesion. The more countries you have, the higher the speed of unlocking the next principal mandate, but the more difficult it will also be to keep control over your member countries, potentially leading to them being pulled into a competing power bloc. Kicking a less powerful member out might be worth it in order to restore balance. Similarly helpful could be picking a more generous principal as your next one, so that you can keep up cohesion. When you've found a way to stabilize your bloc to comfortable levels, you should look for the next potential target to acquire. Finding the balance between how many countries you can support to keep under your reign and where you invest your diplomatic resources is going to be key if you are leading a power bloc. Maybe you should stick to Bavaria and Denmark as your next targets, although Bavaria is of course much more important than Denmark, let's be real here. On the other hand, the contributions of a great power like France would bring might be worth it. So basically, normally when we have these kind of relations, you have slots or it's, a particular thing that is very hard-coded. That doesn't seem to be the thing here. Cohesion makes this a very flexible and versatile mechanic where you say, okay, I can really settle on how much I want to exploit this power bloc, and that means I can't have too many members in it because it brings down cohesion, or I make it very beneficial and all of a sudden I can have a ton of members. For example, I assume that Zollverein as a normal trade league is pretty, basically innocent. It doesn't really do much with the members of that power bloc, which means you can have a ton of German miners without really being impacted by it. I like this, but balancing will play a crucial role here. Listen, let me be honest, if this was a power bloc and they said, okay, at this level of principles you can only have 10 members, then you would have a very clear balancing situation behind this. I like this much more flexible approach with cohesion and how it interacts with the principles, with your identity and with the member states, and that of course impacts your leverage, making it so that you can disintegrate if, you can't really keep control of everything. But again, the balancing will play a massive role there, and in particular how the AI handles it. That is going to be the question of the day. But alright, they have something that I'm super excited for, and that is called a power struggle. You managed to get France to join the Venetian League. Congratulations! I would like to point your attention towards France's prestige. Since it's more than 20% higher than yours, they have automatically initiated a power struggle. If they succeed in keeping that score up for a full year, they will assume leadership of the Venetian League, demoting you to a regular member. France might even want to rename your power bloc afterwards. Mon Dieu. I really like that approach there for sure. I don't think that this is something that happened too much with the empires of the, basically entire thing, but I do think this would happen in a fairly decentralized, just, a very basic trade league. It's easy for a small country to overtake another small country. Now, I do really like the idea of the power struggle here, making it much more dynamic, making it so that I as a player don't always just have to abandon a power bloc, I can just take it over. This is pretty neat. I will say, obviously, historically speaking, that didn't happen too much. It's not like Australia or Canada said, we are now the leader of the British Empire. That didn't ever really happen, but I like the idea, especially because it will enable players to really push further. It also makes it so that a power bloc can stay viable even if I completely dismantle its leader. If I, let's say, for example, take about France, it could be that, I don't know, France had Italy or Spain in their power bloc, and all of a sudden the power bloc stays functioning because, well, it just shifts to Italy or Spain. I like this idea for sure. I think it's also really nice to implement. Here I have yet another open question. If I have this powerful member, can I just evict them and that means they can't take it over? Or is it inevitable unless I take over the prestige once more? These are the questions that I have there for sure. I have a lot of questions about the details here basically, but in general I really like this design. Now, speaking of design, last but not least, as I said at the very start of this video, there is a free version of the power blocks. Let's talk about them. Note that there is going to be a core version of power blocks that is going to launch with a free update for all players, even if you did not purchase Sphere of Influence. The free version allows you to pick the trade league identity, making it possible to recreate shared markets, whose functionality we have moved from a diplomatic pact into the power block feature. It also replicates the sphering mechanics from Victoria 2 in a more natural way than subjugation or negotiating for custom unions pacts. And then of course the part of the power blocks that is part of the expansion is everything related to other identities, principles, statues and so on. I definitely like this, making sure that you have this playable, that this base feature also becomes a literal base feature in vanilla is an important thing, because this fundamentally changes the nature of customs unions. where, if I'm reading this correctly, customs unions basically don't exist anymore. You have to be a major power and create a trade league at the very least. Makes sense to me. I mean, establishing a market should be difficult. I personally think that Victoria 3 should much more often work with trade pacts rather than with just markets fusing together. So yeah, I'm definitely on board with this right here. Basically, if you don't buy this DLC, you will get trade leagues, which is the new elevation of customs union as they exist in the current game, and then you can expand on that if you have the DLC indeed. Alright, now before we get an outlook of what is coming the next week, let me just summarize my opinion here. I like power blocks in general, although I have so many questions about so many mechanics here in greater detail, which, yeah, makes sense. I mean, Victoria 3 is a very complex game. Knowing the specifics of these mechanics is very important. In general, the design intention, the way it is designed to, for example, make it possible for a different nation to take over a power block, I'm totally on board with this. I also like the idea that customs unions are now gone and instead it is indeed a power block thing, once more unifying indeed sphering and the market supremacy. I like this idea a lot and I think there's a lot to look forward to in this regard. Now again, we can't really tell exactly what this looks like in the details and the devil is exactly there, of course. The big question indeed is for me how open I can declare that I don't want to join a particular power block, how open I can work against leverage of a particular power block, and so on. Because just being pulled into something without you realizing that this is about to happen would of course kind of suck. Anyway, let me know what you think about this. Next week, super interesting stuff, we will be talking about foreign investment and building ownership. Now that is a topic that I love. After that, we got subject interactions, then lobbies, and more on power blocks. After that, the great game, then the art of sphere of influence, and last but not least, on the 2nd of May, so just 4 days before the release, the changelog will be released. I like it, I think there's a lot to look forward to. I would like to hear your opinion as always, but I'll leave you right here, and I will see you later, alligator.